through how to submit a wage report using the ICESA file format. To help us build the file, we'll reference the ICESA format instructions available in the Employer and TPA Resource section of MyUI University. We'll keep these instructions open on the left side of our screen so we can follow along as we go. ICESA files must be submitted as text files and use a fixed length format. This means each field must begin in a specific position within the file. Additionally, each record must be exactly 275 characters long. So your cursor should be in position 276 before pressing enter. Not all ICESA records and data fields are required by the Michigan Unemployment Insurance Agency. For any fields not required by Michigan UIA, you should either leave those positions blank or enter the data specified in the standard ICESA format as applicable. Although the ICESA format includes several record types, Michigan UIA only requires the E record, otherwise known as employer header record, and the S record, otherwise known as employee detail record. Every ICESA file must begin with the employer header record. As a reminder, ICESA uses a fixed length format, meaning every field must start in a specific position within the text file. You'll notice line and column identifiers at the bottom of the text file to help guide you. As we go, I'll call out the positions so you know exactly where each field belongs. Let's go ahead and get started with the employer header record. Starting at line 1, column 1, we will enter the record identifier for the employer. The record identifier for the ICESA file format is always E. In columns 2 through 5, we will enter the reporting period year in the CCYY format. We will go ahead and enter 2026. For the ICESA file, Michigan UIA does not require us to enter the employer FEAN, so we will fill columns 6 through 14 with 9 blanks instead. It's important to note that blanks are not zeros. You will simply hit the space bar to fill those columns. Michigan UIA also does not require us to enter the state and local, so we will fill columns 15 through 23 with 9 blanks. Columns 24 through 73 are where we will enter the employer name with spaces as needed. Since ICESA is a fixed length file format, once we are done entering the employer name, we will enter blanks till we hit column 74. We will then enter the employer address in columns 74 through 113. Once again, we will follow the same guidance indicated before and enter blanks till we hit column 114. Now we will enter the city name in columns 114 through 138. Once entered, we will follow up with blanks as needed to hit column 139. We can now add the 2-character state abbreviation for the employer's location in columns 139 and 140. The state abbreviation will be followed up with a filler, meaning we will enter 8 blanks for columns 141 through 148. Next, in columns 149 through 153, we will enter the 4-digit zip code extension with a dash at the beginning. If there is no zip code extension, simply enter 5 blanks instead. Followed by the employer 5-digit zip code in columns 154 through 158. Michigan UIA does not require us to enter the name, code, type of employment, blocking factor, establishment number of coverage group, taxing entity code, and state identifier. So we will enter blanks from columns 159 through 172. Next, we will enter the employer account number, otherwise known as EAN. We will not enter any symbols or spaces. This will go in columns 173 through 179. The employer account number will follow up with a filler, meaning we will enter 8 blanks for columns 180 through 187. Next, we will enter the reporting period quarter in the QQ format in columns 188 and 189. The quarter should reflect the last month of the reporting period. So quarter 1 is represented by 03, quarter 2 by 06, quarter 3 by 09, and quarter 4 by 12. So for quarter 1 of 2026, we will input 03. Michigan UIA does not require us to enter no worker/no wages, tax type code, taxing entity code, state control number, or unit number. So we will enter blanks from column 190 to 208. In column 209, we will enter Y if the employer has apportionment program indicator as activated, and N if the employer has apportionment program indicator as deactivated. If the employer wishes to request apportionment for the first quarter taxes, the indicator will need to be activated. If this field is left blank, MyUI will interpret this response as an N. In column 210, we will indicate whether or not this is the employer's final wage report. This would mean that they are terminating or inactivating the business. We will enter Y if yes, and N if no. We will follow up with a filler, meaning we will enter 44 blanks for columns 211 through 254. Michigan UIA does not require us to enter a limitation of liability indicator, foreign indicator, This will be followed up with a filler, and Michigan UIA does not require us to enter other FEEN, so we will enter blanks from column 255 to 266. This will be followed up with a filler, meaning we will enter 9 blanks till we get to the required 275 characters, and our cursor is in position 276. We will now move on to the employee record by clicking Enter. Notice that we are now on line 2, column 1. This is because this is the second record within our file. All employee records will begin with the S record identifier. We will enter the Social Security number for the employee in columns 2 through 10. Do not include any hyphens when entering the Social Security number. Now it is time to enter the name of the employee, starting with their last name, in columns 11 through 30. Once the last name is entered, we will follow up with blanks needed to hit column 31. If there is no last name, enter blanks in columns 11 through 30. We will enter the employee's first name in columns 31 through 42, and we'll follow up with blanks as needed to hit column 43. If there is no first name, enter blanks in columns 31 through 42. Now it is time to enter the employee's middle initial in column 43. If there is no middle initial, a blank can be entered. Next, we will enter the Michigan code in columns 44 and 45. This number must be 26. In columns 46 and 47, we will enter the proper adjustment code for the wage report. A code of 00 means that this is the original filing, and a code of 01 means that this is an adjustment because of incorrectly reported wages. A blank field will be treated as a 00 if this is an original filing, or as a 01 for an adjustment. For a description of adjustment codes 02 through 10, review the file format instructions on MyUI University. The adjustment code will be followed up with a filler, meaning we will enter 2 blanks for columns 48 and 49. Now we will enter the total UI gross wages earned by the employee during the reporting period in columns 50 through 63. Because this field is right justified, all 14 characters must be used. This means you will need to add leading zeros before the wage amount to ensure the field is completely filled. Do not include commas or decimals. The last 2 digits will be considered the cents figure. For example, if an employee made $10,000.99 in a quarter, we would enter 00000000100000099 in the field. Michigan UIA does not require us to enter the total state quarterly wages subject to unemployment tax, quarterly wages in excess of the state UI taxable wage base, state quarterly UI total wages less state quarterly excess wages, quarterly state disability insurance taxable wages, quarterly tip wages, number of weeks worked, number of hours worked, and taxing entity code. So we will enter blanks for columns 64 through 146. In columns 147 through 153, we will once again enter the employer account number for the business associated with this employee. The employer account number will be followed up with a filler, meaning we will enter 7 blanks for columns 154 through 160. Afterwards, we will enter the reporting unit number, also known as the location account, for the employer in columns 161 through 163. If there is no reporting unit number, we will enter 3 zeros. The reporting unit number will be followed up with a filler, meaning we will enter 13 blanks for columns 164 through 176. Michigan UIA does not require us to enter the state taxable wages and state income withheld, so we will enter blanks for columns 164 through 204. In column 205, we will either enter a Y or an N for the seasonal indicator, which indicates whether the employee worked during the pay period that included seasonal wages during this reporting period. Note that seasonal employment is not automatic. A seasonal employer must apply for seasonal designation by UIA at least 20 days before the season starts. Given our employer does not have an approved seasonal designation, we will enter N. If this field is left blank, the season defaults to an N. This will be followed up with a filler in column 206. Michigan UIA does not require us to enter the employer health insurance code, employee health insurance code, and probationary code, so we will enter blanks for columns 206 through 209. Column 210 is where we will enter the officer code. We will insert a Y if the employee is an owner or officer of the business, and an N if they are not. If this field is left blank, the system will default to an N. Michigan UIA does not require us to enter the wage plan code, so we will enter a blank in column 211. Columns 212 through 214 is where we will enter the employment data for months 1 through 3. For each of the 3 months in the quarter, we will add separate indicators to show whether or not the employee was employed on the 12th day of each month. And number 1 will indicate that the employee was employed on the 12th of that month, while a 0 will indicate that they were not. We will then enter the reporting period year and quarter in the CCYYQQ format in columns 215 through 220. The quarter should reflect the last month of the reporting period. So quarter 1 is represented by 03, quarter 2 by 06, quarter 3 by 09, and quarter 4 by 12. So for quarter 1 of 2026, we will enter 202603. Michigan UIA does not require us to enter the month and year first employed, as well as the month and year of separation. So we will enter blanks in columns 221 through 232. Next, we will enter the out-of-state wages earned by the employee during the reporting period in columns 233 through 243. Note that this should be right justified and there should be no commas or decimals included. The last two digits will be considered the sentence figure. For example, if an employee made $10,000.99 in a quarter, we would enter 00001000099 in the field. This employee did not have out-of-state wages to report, so we will enter 11 blanks instead. Columns 244 and 245 is where we will enter the state code where out-of-state wages were earned using the USPS postal abbreviation. Since no out-of-state wages were earned, we will enter 2 blanks. Columns 246 through 259 is where we can enter obligation gross wages paid to the employee during the reporting period when the obligation assessment is active. Because the obligation assessment is not currently active, we will enter 14 zeros. Note that we are entering zeros and not blanks. Next, we will enter the visa wage indicator in column 260 to show whether the employee has reportable visa wages. This field is required only when the obligation assessment is in effect. Enter Y if the visa wages are active and N if they are not. If left blank, the system will interpret the field as N. Finally, we will enter 14 blanks so our record is the required 275 characters and our cursor is in position 276. Let's practice adding one more employee. We will once again click Enter to begin this record on line 3, column 1. And we will once again type the S record identifier. Next, we will enter the Social Security number for the employee in columns 2 through 10. As a reminder, do not include any hyphens when entering this. Now we will enter the last name of the employee in columns 11 through 30. Once the last name is entered, we will follow up with blanks needed to hit column 31. Columns 31 through 42 is where we will enter the employee's first name, and we'll follow up with blanks as needed to hit column 43. Now it is time to enter the employee's middle initial in columns 43. In column 44 and 45, we will enter the Michigan code. As a reminder, this number must be 26. In columns 46 and 47, we will enter the adjustment code for the wage report. This employee did receive out-of-state wages, so we will enter 10. The adjustment code will be followed up with a filler, meaning we will enter 2 blanks for columns 48 and 49. Now we will enter the total UI gross wages earned by the employee during the reporting period in columns 50 through 63. Remember that this should be right justified and all 14 characters must be used. Michigan UIA does not require us to enter the total state quarterly wages subject to unemployment tax, quarterly wages in excess of the state UI taxable wage base, state quarterly UI total wages less state quarterly excess wages, quarterly state disability insurance taxable wages, quarterly tip wages, number of weeks worked, number of hours worked, and taxing entity code. We will add a filler of 8 blanks between number of hours worked and taxing entity code. So in total, we will enter blanks from columns 64 through 146. In columns 147 through 153, we will once again enter the employer account number for the business associated with this employee. The employer account number will be followed up with a filler, meaning we will enter 7 blanks for columns 154 through 160. Afterwards, we will enter the reporting unit number in columns 161 through 163. Michigan UIA does not require us to enter the state taxable wages and state income withheld, so we will enter blanks for columns 164 through 204. In column 205, we will enter the seasonal indicator, which indicates whether or not the employee worked during the pay period that included seasonal wages. This will be followed up with a filler in column 206. Michigan UIA does not require us to enter the employer health insurance code, employee health insurance code, and probationary code. So we will enter blanks for columns 206 through 209. Column 210 is where we will enter the officer code. We will enter a Y if the employee is an owner or officer of the business, and an N if they are not. Michigan UIA does not require us to enter the wage plan code, so we will enter a blank in column 211. In columns 212 through 214, we will enter the employment data for months 1 through 3. For each of the 3 months in the quarter, we will add separate indicators to show whether or not the employee was employed on the 12th day of each month. We will then enter the reporting period year and quarter in the CCYYQQ format in columns 215 through 220. Michigan UIA does not require us to enter the month and year first employed, as well as the month and year of separation. So we will enter blanks in columns 221 through 232. Next, we will enter the out-of-state wages earned by the employee during the reporting period in columns 233 through 243. As a reminder, this should be right justified and there should be no commas or decimals included. This employee did earn out-of-state wages, so we will go ahead and enter those now. In columns 244 and 245, we will enter the state code where out-of-state wages were earned. Because the obligation assessment is not currently active, we will enter 14 zeros in columns 246 through 259. And we will enter an N in column 260. Finally, we will enter 14 blanks, so our record is the required 275 characters and our cursor is in position 276. We have now completed our ICESA file and are ready to submit our wage report.